Tonight we're going to complete this brief study on Balaam. Balaam, one of the more curious characters in the Bible. Curious because he in many ways seemed to be a very good man of God. He believed in God. He desired, at least for the most part, to obey God. He spoke with God face to face, as it were. And he was a prophet of God. Nonetheless, he possessed a fatal flaw. In fact, it would eventually turn out literally to be fatal for him, that proved to be his undoing. And his story is really a potent reminder to all of us that the same could happen to anyone, even Christians, and sometimes does. So let me quickly summarize what we've covered thus far in the past couple weeks. And we've read from Numbers 22, 23, and 24. When Israel approached Canaan from the east and camped near the Jordan River, the surrounding nations became very anxious about that for good reason, because they'd heard the stories that virtually every nation that sent out an army to oppose the Israelites were thrashed. They were defeated with the help of the God of the Israelites. Well, a local king near the border, near the Jordan River, Balak, king of the Moabites, decided to mitigate the threat by enlisting the aid of a prophet that he'd heard about, to see if he could get that prophet, bribe him, reward him, whatever it took, to curse the Israelites so that they would basically go away some other place, bother somebody else, as it were. And God had actually used Balaam on occasion, apparently, to accomplish God's purposes, to allow Balaam to curse certain people for God's purposes, and they would be cursed, or to bless others, and apparently they would be blessed. Well, and so Balaam had this reputation. That's why King Balak sent representatives to him. Well, after sending those representatives, Balaam replied that all he could do was what God instructed him to do. So he would essentially take the matter to God and then let God tell him. And God did. God told Balaam, number one, don't go with these men. Number two, don't curse the people. And number three, the people are blessed. In other words, if anything's going to happen to Israel, God's going to bless them. So, of course, Balaam sent word of the same to King Balak. And King Balak would not take no for an answer. So he sent more representatives to Balaam and offered a greater reward. And Balaam really had his eyes on that reward. I've stressed that, and I want to keep stressing that, because that happens to people today. And I'm talking about Christian people here. Well, anyway, he again inquired of God, and this time God said something different. God said, go with these messengers, but speak only what I tell you to say. So he went. He met with King Balak. He offered sacrifices on 3 occasions, and blessed by the command of God Israel, not cursed, blessed them on 3 occasions. And of course, all of that combined to make King Balak so mad, furious, that he finally told Balaam to flee. He better flee literally for his life. So ultimately, 2 plans backfired. King Balak's plan to curse Israel totally backfired. But also Balaam's plan, to the best of our knowledge, backfired to get this reward. As far as we know, he ended up with nothing. Although he might, through later negotiations, and we'll talk about that in just a few moments, he might have ended up with a little something, but in the long run, he ended up the loser. Well, there is one question about this story that we really want to examine tonight, and that is, why did God change his mind? Why did God first say to Balaam, do not go with these representatives from King Balak? And then on the second occasion, why did God say, go ahead, go with them? Why would God do that? Well, to understand the answer, we're going to read the very verses that we skipped the previous 2 Sunday nights. We're going to go now to Numbers chapter 22 and begin at verse 22. And I think we'll understand why God seemingly consented. All right, so this is after Balaam now receiving the word from God. Okay, you can go with them. Just speak what I say to speak. He saddled his donkey and he went with the emissaries of King Balak to meet him. Then, and this is surprising in view of what God had just told him, then God's anger was aroused because he went. Wow, does that quite make sense? Well, we'll read on. And the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way between Balaam and Balak that he was going to as an adversary against him. So God is very angry that Balaam goes, and God actually sends this angel to stand in his way. Now, why would God do that, especially in verse 20, that he said, you go? Because God had previously said, don't. Folks, when God sets down a law, when God says, do this or don't do that, he means it. And not just until he changes his mind about it. Now, if he says don't do it, folks, you don't do it. But the problem is, Balaam had it in his mind, by hook or crook, he was going to go. He wanted that reward. And God knew it. So God took this as an opportunity to teach both Balaam and King Balak a lesson, beginning with Balaam. Verse 22, continuing. And he, Balaam, was riding his donkey, and his two servants were with him. Now the donkey saw the angel that we just read about standing in his way between him and the king out in the distance, saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with a drawn sword in his hand, and that was no stupid donkey. This donkey had some intelligence, believe you me, and the donkey turned aside out of the way. He wasn't going to go toward that angel with the drawn sword. He was smart enough to know that could only mean one thing. And he went into the field, so he went wayward of where Balaam wanted him to go. So Balaam struck the donkey to get her to go back down onto the road. Verse 24. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path between the vineyards with a wall on this side and a wall on that side. So now it's going to be a little harder to get around the angel. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, again, the donkey sees the threat, she pushed herself against the wall. She's trying to get away from the angel, not to run into the angel with a sword, but she can't go very far, so she goes against the wall and crushes Balaam's foot against the wall. Balaam, of course, has no idea why she's suddenly so disobedient. So what does he do? He struck her again. Now, that donkey did not like getting struck, but what was ahead was better. I mean, it was better to be struck than continue on. Then the angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn either to the right hand or to the left. So now the donkey's really in a predicament. She can't go anywhere. And she's going to do the only thing she can do, keep from getting slain by that angel with the drawn sword. Verse 27, and when the donkey saw that the angel of the Lord, she lay down. She just collapsed. I can't go forward. Just fall down under Balaam. And Balaam is so confused. What? You can just read his mouth. What is going on with you? So Balaam's anger was aroused. This time he's really mad, and he struck the donkey with a staff. Now earlier he might have struck the donkey with his hand or his boot, but now he pulls out his staff and really hits that donkey hard. And then God does something so wonderful. We love this story. And this is not make-believe. This is not Twilight Zone stuff. This is for real. Verse 28. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey. And this is not the best part, by the way. The Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times? Here's the best part. What would you have said if you were Balaam? I would have passed out. Or I would have jumped off and run the other way. An animal talking to me? Something's wrong here. But no, he just talks like it's an ordinary conversation with someone he meets on the street. And Balaam said to the donkey, well, because you abused me. I wish there were a sword in my hand, for now I would kill you. So the donkey speaks again, said to Balaam, am I not your donkey, which you have ridden ever since I became yours? to this day? Wow. Was I ever disposed to do this to you? And again, Balaam, fascinating. He's listening. I don't know if the thought occurred to him that this shouldn't be happening, but he's listening, and you can just see him thinking. He's pondering how to answer the question, have I ever done something like this, been disposed to do this? And you could just see him saying, no. As if, well, this is odd. Not the fact we're carrying on a... This is odd that you've treated me this way. I love this. Verse 31. Then, okay, God says, all right, it's time to show Balaam what he's up against. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes. By the way, I have to add this. Have you ever wondered sometimes if your pets can see things that you cannot? Have you ever wondered that? I have on occasion. Sometimes, and it might be a sound, who knows? Sometimes it seems like animals have that, just that extra sense that they can pick up on something that just we can't. But obviously the Lord not only let this donkey see the angel, but the Lord obviously let the donkey talk. All right. So the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in his way, or in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. And now Balaam said, well, what would we say? Whoa, Nelly. All right. Yes. Okay. We don't need to go anywhere from here. And then Balaam basically does just what the donkey did. He bowed his head and fell flat on his face. And the angel of the Lord said to him, God bless you. Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out to stand against you because your way is perverse against me. God knew, the angel knew that Balaam's motive here was not to obey God. His motive was to get his hands on that reward. Verse 33. The angel continuing, the donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. Fortunate for you, Balaam, that's the idea there. And you almost wonder if the angel was trying to say, Balaam, perhaps if you'd not been daydreaming about how to spend this reward, you just might have caught a glimpse of me as well. You almost get that feeling. Angel continues, if she had not turned aside from me, surely I also would have killed you by now and let her live. The donkey here is a lot more righteous, literally, than Balaam was. Verse 34, and Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, he means well. Balaam does. You'll see this. But his heart's not right in the right place. Listen to what he says. He says, I have sinned. I have sinned. But listen to what he says. For I did not know that you stood in the way against me. That's the only reason he thinks he's done wrong. Because he's keeping going when an angel there is there to stop him. Folks, that was not the real sin. The real sin was he didn't listen to God when God first said, do not go with these people. And he doesn't quite get that. And then listen to this, to make it a little worse. Now, therefore, now that I know that you're there to oppose me, and remember, the angel is saying, God is opposing what you're doing. God is opposing your going. But listen to what Balaam says. Now, therefore, if it displeases you, where's the if? If it displeases you, I will turn back. Well, Balaam, what part of an angel with a drawn sword standing there ready to kill you don't you get? And the problem is he can't get his mind off the money. All right? The reward, whatever it is. Then the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, now listen to this. Go. Go with him. I'll never forget. It's sad that it takes us to get a little older before we understand. When someone kind of humors us, just to teach us a lesson. That's exactly what's happening here. I remember there was several occasions, I'm sure, but I remember one occasion, and I suppose the weather we're having now reminds me of it, especially when I was very young, and me and my sister, and I think my youngest brother, maybe my older brother, I don't forget, but I know my sister and I were in on this. There was a fair amount of snow outside, and we used to love to, build snowmen and build snow forts, in the drifts, try to build a tunnel through there, and all this. Well, we wanted to go out and do that one afternoon. And Mom said, no. Well, why, Mom? Well, first of all, it's too cold. You shouldn't be out there. Second of all, because of the temperature, the snow's not going to pack. It'll just be like powder in your hands. You can't dig anything. You can't throw snowballs. So no. That was the first answer. So we started whining and walking around the house like a bunch of sad sacks. Well, we're just going to drive Mom crazy. Mom, can't we go outside? I don't know how many times we asked her, but finally, I remember Mom just looked at us and said, go. Just get your coats on. Go. Do it. And within 15 minutes, we were all back inside the house. And, I talk about sometimes in wintertime how my fingers now get a little cold and painful. I mean, we came in and our hands were so red and painful. And you know what really hurt? I remember what hurt the most is Mom said, well, put your hands over the heat register in the floor. And I'll tell you what, that really made those fingers ache. But Mom said, yeah, go to teach us. And that's exactly what happens here with the angel. Go. I know what's in your heart. In other words, just go with them in. But make sure you do this. Only the word that I speak to you, that you shall speak. So Balaam went with the princes of Balak. And the rest, they say, the rest is history. We've read about it. Balaam, ended up blessing Israel 3 times and arousing the wrath of King Balak. So God did get his way in the end. Now you might assume that Balaam learned his lesson. But he didn't. He still had an eye on the money. Even after he blessed the nation of Israel 3 times, and King Balak said, you better flee. At some point, Balaam had further discussion with King Balak. We're not told specifically of that conversation, except in other passages. It's almost like as he's going back home, Balaam just can't stand it. I'm not going home empty-handed. I'm either going to get back in touch with the king or I'm going to send for the king to come to me because, as we would say, there's got to be more than one way to skin a cat. Well, that's a horrible expression, isn't it? But I'm told, however, that expression does not mean the domesticated kind of cat, if that makes you feel a little bit better. All right. How do we know that conversation happened? Turn your Bibles quickly to the book of Revelation chapter 2. Or at least listen as I read it. I'm just going to read verse 14. Revelation 2:14. Here's the message of Jesus to the church in Pergamos, one of the 7 churches of Asia. He says, I have a few things against you because you have there those who hold the doctrine of Balaam. That's speaking of the same one we've been studying. The doctrine of Balaam? What's the doctrine of Balaam? We'll read about it. Who taught, so at some point they had this long conversation, who taught Balak, the king, to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel. That would include the following: to eat things sacrificed to idols and to commit sexual immorality. So at some point, Balaam got together with the king and said, you know what? I know I bless the people. But you know what? If you will corrupt the people of Israel, if you'll lure them into sin, send some of your women over there. If you'll tempt them to do what violates the laws of God, God will curse them for you. And do you know that's exactly what happened? Go back with me to Numbers 25. I'll just read the first 3 verses. At some point after that little conversation between Balaam and Balak, where Balaam said, this is how you do this thing. Now, Israel remained in the acacia grove, that's still right in that same area, And the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. Moab, literally, they send their most attractive prostitutes and somehow infiltrated into the camp of Israel. They invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, so-called gods, and the people ate and bowed down, not to Jehovah, to their gods. So Israel was joined to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was aroused against them, and God ended up killing 24,000 Israelites. So in a sense, King Balak finally got his way. The problem was he wanted not 24,000, not 240,000. He wanted 2.4 million of the Israelites to be killed or more. That never happened. But Balak, the king, was eventually killed. And again, how about Balaam? Did he ever get his reward? Maybe he did after this conversation with the king. But one thing we're told, he didn't live very long to enjoy it, because when you read Numbers 31, verse 8, you find out that Balaam himself was slain, killed by the Israelites with the sword. Let me close all this with 3 important lessons for us. Number 1, if you're out walking your pet and he or she refuses to budge, maybe you should not force them. Now, if your pet talks to you, get it on video and you'll be famous. More seriously, lesson number 2, beware the love of money. Money, the love of money is the root of all evil. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10. And listen to 2 New Testament writers describe what the love of money can do, and listen to who they use as the example. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 15, Peter is describing the wicked. And he says, they have forsaken the right way and gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved the wages, the reward, literally, of unrighteousness. In a sense, he was a prophet. In a sense, he wanted to do what God told him to do, and he did, to a degree. But that prophet was always there, and that's what led him astray. And in Jude, verse 11, again, speaking of the wicked, Jude says this, woe to them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, have run greedily in the error of Balaam for profit. When people put money ahead of all other things and become obsessed and think about money, they always go in the wrong direction. And the final lesson I shared last week also, don't ever try to figure out a way out of God's laws, figure out a way around them, to circumvent them, that somehow to think, well, I know this is what God says, but in my situation, for me, it's not that bad. I can get away with this. You'll never win. You will always regret that. And again, I know firsthand. I've tried that before on more than one occasion where I just figured in my situation, this, God's word, explicit word, does not exactly apply. And oh, if I regretted that. I close this lesson with these words from the wise man. This is from Proverbs chapter 23, verse 26. Now, this is Solomon, as it were, talking to his son. But also, this is God speaking to us. He says, my son, give me your heart. Give me your heart. There's a lot of children who will obey, especially under threat of punishment, obey their parents for fear of being punished. And thus, if they can disobey without being found out, they'll disobey. But if their hearts belong to their parents, if their hearts really go out to their parents, chances are they'll always do what the parents want. My son, give me your heart and let your eyes observe my ways. Give me your heart and then do what I tell you to do. That's what God asks us to do. More specifically, that's what Jesus asked us to do, and we'll never regret it. If anyone tonight is subject to the invitation of Jesus Christ, most of you, if not all, have obeyed the gospel. But if there's anyone who needs our prayers tonight, who needs to repent and needs to turn around, or just needs our prayers for help in your life, you can come up and have a seat up here, and we'll certainly pray for you. We'd be honored to. If you need to, would you come as we stand and sing the song of invitation?